So the structure of the alcohol industry. Now, this is a very interesting topic because it tends to be a little more expansive than we realize when at first glance. So there are more components to the alcohol industry than we might think. It's more than just the producers. It's more than just the manufacturers. They're just one part. So we have the alcohol producers who are producing the product. They're producing the beer, they're producing the wine, they're producing the distilled spirits. But we have the distributors as part of that structure. So the producers sell their product to the distributors, and then the distributors sell their products to the retailers themselves. So you actually have these three distinct levels within the alcohol industry that all require each other and all support each other to earn the most profit. Now, who are the retailers? Who's at the bottom of this chain? Well, you have two types. You have your on-premise retailers where alcohol is being consumed in the same location as it's sold. So these are your bars, your nightclubs, your restaurants. And then you have off-premise retailers. So this is where alcohol is bought and consumed in different locations. So these are your liquor stores and your grocery stores. Now, there's a lot of ways we regulate alcohol retailers. One is licensure. That's almost a minimum standard of regulation for these type of facilities. So what licensure does is it ensures that they're complying with local regulations regarding minimum legal purchases laws and barring of selling to intoxicated customers. When they fail to do those, they lose their license, they lose their ability to sell alcohol. We can do place and time restrictions. So we can limit how many on or off-premise retailers can exist through local zoning boards in a given geographic location in different communities. And we do have time restrictions. Typically, alcohol cannot, in a lot of places, alcohol can't be sold before lunch. And a lot of places are saying alcohol can't be sold 24 hours a day. So they'll put limits at 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. or even midnight where alcohol must be stopped. And then there are some systems on a state level, provincial level, as well as on a national level where there are government-owned stores. The state actually owns a monopoly. Now, these are really only for off-premise retailers. There's no state-owned bar monopolies out there. But these government-owned stores typically are the only source of high alcohol content beverages where they occur. So they're really the only place you can purchase wine, and they're really the only place you can purchase distilled spirits. And it's a way that the state can directly control the availability of these products. Now, who are the producers? Now, the producers are an ever-changing entity. So at the beginning, there were actually government monopolies. So their governments themselves were actually producing the alcohol. Now, this is relatively rare. So right now, pretty much all alcohol bought and sold is produced through private companies, whether that's privately owned companies by just a few people, or whether that's publicly traded companies, transnational corporations that are producing these products. But more and more, these craft producers, whether they're beer, whether they're distilled spirits, whether they're wine, are reducing in number, and these transnational corporations are growing larger and larger. So let's do a brief case study. We'll talk about AB InBev. So in 2004, the largest European beer producer bought the largest South American beer producer to create the world's largest beer producing company called AmBev. Individually, they were the third and fifth largest, but combined, they actually produced more beer worldwide than Anheuser-Busch and SAB-Miller. They had about 10 billion euros of sales at the time, and they had access to 140 countries, which is a lot of markets. It may not have been the largest markets in the world. It wasn't necessarily the US market, but they had the largest, but InBev at the time had access to 140 countries. Now, in 2008, InBev purchased Anheuser-Busch. So in 2008, Anheuser-Busch was no longer an American company. Now, this was a very large sale. $52 billion is a large chunk of money. But by doing this, they again created the largest beer producer in the world, certainly larger than SAB-Miller, and their sales went from 10 billion euros, which is something like, say, 12 to 15 billion dollars, to 36 billion dollars a year. They increased their market presence, they increased the number of markets they had access to, and they increased the number of products in each one of those markets that they could sell. But they were not done. this massive behemoth of an alcohol producer, AB InBev, decided in 2016 to purchase SAB Miller. So they decided to purchase the second largest beer producer in the world for $100 billion. So the mergers have significantly increased both in size as well as in dollar amounts. $100 billion to purchase SAB Miller. Well, and SAB Miller itself was formed through a consolidation when South African breweries purchased Miller Brewing in 1999. Now, the interesting thing about this is here in the United States, for this purchase to go through, SAB Miller had to sell off its stakes in the Miller brand. So they had to sell off Miller Genuine Draft and Miller Lite, which are very popular beers. They're very high revenue beers. So why do this purchase if they have to sell off some of their best-selling beers in the United States? Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to the reasons why, but think about that in the meantime. Now, this new massive corporation, I cannot overestimate, or I can't underestimate, or I can't overestimate how big this company is. They have sales of $55 billion. It's actually larger than the gross domestic product of some small countries. Now, during this time of these massive consolidations, AB InBev has been purchasing a lot of craft breweries. There's 10 on the list. I think they're up to a dozen now, steadily buying up well-known, highly rated individual craft breweries to add to their portfolio. So why do all this? Remember, let's go back to the why. Why would AB InBev buy SAB Miller even though they had to divest of very popular brands of beer in the United States? Well, there's a couple reasons. One is that alcohol consumption in these high-income countries in the United States has remained relatively constant or even gone down a little bit. It's not going up. It's a saturated market. It's the same in Western Europe. You really can't, if you're adding a new brand, you're really taking away from your existing brands. So on top of that, they have to find new markets. And these new markets are the low and middle income countries, which may not have a lot of disposable income, but at least they're not saturated environments. There is room from the corporate side. This isn't necessarily a good for public health side, but there is room for new beer brands and new products in these low and middle income countries. Now, on top of all of this, having a larger company means you have more resources to do things along the epidemiological cascade. So you can lobby more. You have more money. You have greater coordination of lobbying across your brands because they're under one large umbrella. And because you own such a large market share, I think AB InBev now owns something like a third to a half of all the beer production in the world. You have a lot of leverage to control the market. And because you own all of these brands, you can actually do complementary marketing campaigns instead of competitive marketing campaigns. One brand can focus on one target population, another brand can focus on another target population. One brand can try to target a population, say young adults, in one way. Another brand can target young adults in another way. They're all the same company. All the revenues are going back to the same central location, but they can actually use complementary methods to target who they want to target with their products. And finally, Anheuser-Busch in particular, AB InBev in particular, through their purchases of these craft brewers, can actually monopolize certain ingredients. So by buying the craft brewer Wicked Weed, they actually control all of the hops that are grown in South Africa. They control all of the breweries that purchase all of the hops in one specific country. So if you're looking for this particular flavor of beer, you can't do it unless you're under the Anheuser-Busch monopoly, under their umbrella.